Rene, I was talking to clients today and I get the same question over and over again, especially by managers who want to see if they're doing the right thing, are their developers being productive, and then they get the feeling that they need to measure these kind of things.
Yeah, a sort of control mechanism, natural control mechanism, or are we doing the right stuff? Can we make it a little bit more tangible? But I think I get the questions, I recognize the questions, and I must admit I sometimes have these questions myself.
It is a
But
hard topic.
it is a hard topic, and I think we need to be very careful because well, you get what you ask for in most of the times, and especially when it comes to metrics. So I think that we can have a podcast around measuring stuff in an engineering culture setting.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to the Lead Podcast.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.
So Rene, one example that I see happening a lot, and especially from people who start thinking about measuring these kind of things, is they start with these basic agile metrics that they see teams using, right? For example, team velocity, like how many story points, for example, are they able to do every sprint? And I think this is a very, very bad practice to use these kind of metrics, which are meant for internal purposes. And they're made for teams so they themselves can see, are we improving, get some estimations on how much stuff can we do within our team. And they're made for that team only, and they're not meant for going across team or going across a long time.
Yeah, I more or less agree, but on the other hand, I don't, because you make it very subjective already that you say, well, these are only internal metrics. But I think that, well, the reasoning behind it, like why do actually people ask for these things and use this time in your example velocity or something, there is a reasoning behind it. And I think we need to go one step back to
always start with the why.
Yeah, start with the why. So why are they asking for it? Because I think traditionally we use these Gantt chart things, right? So we used waterfall approach where we say, okay, we have this project, the project takes this amount of time, and these are the milestones, and we estimate the number of hours and all the work that we need to do. And then we can, although we know that it was always incorrect, at least you had some kind of a baseline on, okay, this is what we aim for. We know how much work we can do within a week or in 2 weeks or whatever. And then we move towards a goal. And then we find out that it is actually never accurate. But I think going back to that question of we don't have Gantt charts anymore because we are now doing Scrum or Agile, what is the other approach to make it? And I think velocity is one of the things, and story points and burn down.
Yeah. So I hope, right? Well, everyone is embracing Agile or saying that they're Agile. So working on one big goal is often no longer there, right? It's cut up into smaller goals, features, epics, stories, whatever you call them. They're smaller pieces of work that are not always relatable or not always comparable. So that's
exactly
you still have a question. Okay, I have so many developers walking around. Are they actually are they productive? Do they need
progressing towards the goal?
And but are they doing well? Should we give them more training so they can work faster? Do they have the right tools and all those kind of things? Yeah, that's also things that they are trying to evolve. So I had this question by a client. They said, "Yeah, we're sending these developers to a course to learn about cloud computing and infrastructure as code and all these kind of things. Will I see that back in the velocity later on?"
Yeah.
I was like, probably not, but it might. And you don't want to
Yeah.
You don't want to see those kind of things. It could have effect.
No, yeah, and people can gamify that thing, because I think what is a bad practice is that velocity in Scrum, it uses story points, and story points, yeah, well, it's squirrels or cars or buildings or whatever. It that is an internal thing. So a story point, one story point, it's relative to other story points, and there is no amount of hours normally attached to story points, and that is, of course, from a management perspective, very hard. Like a team says, oh, we only need to burn 5 more story points and then it's done.
Yeah.
But if you don't know, but 5 story points, is that 2 months or is that 5 days? If you don't know, you don't have control. So I think trying to project older things like hours onto, well, also older things, because Scrum is also around for 20 plus years, on story points, I think that is where we go wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that is also where we can see gamification and gaming the system, where we say, oh, well, if you want to see number of story points going up or down,
let's increase our estimations by 1 story point every month, right?
Exactly. And do our developers get more productive when we send them on a course? Of course, because now a story is all of a sudden 2 story points instead of 1, and we are getting all of a sudden more productive.
No, so yeah, that's to come back to that question from that client I had. He said, will I see that back in velocity? I said, it could go either way, right? So either they now know how to do things, so they will lower the estimations, and maybe they will get less done story point wise, because it has less unknowns for them.
Yes.
Or the other way around, that they can do things faster, and maybe they can do some extra work. But yeah, it's just the wrong tool to measure these kind of things.
And I think the one thing that is really proving your story here is that you cannot focus on measuring only one thing. I also heard stories of, okay, the number of bugs that we have in our software needs to be reduced. That's great. So all the bugs were now suddenly reported as tasks. So if we count the number of bugs on the backlog, we just put them differently on the backlog. If we want to measure the number of commits, we will just commit every line of code separately, and we will increase the number of commits. If we want to make our code quality better, then we will just suppress all the messages from our code quality tools, and all of a sudden we have less messages. So I think the intention of all these measurements are very good. I think that we only need to start looking at also different things where we could focus on to have a better and broader perspective.
Yeah, so it's 2 things, right? So it's measuring, which is not bad. Measuring your velocity, measuring the amount of bugs, measuring all those things is good. So you have that info. Steering on it, that's where it goes wrong.
Exactly. Making the conclusions, and the wrong conclusions in many cases, that is the wrong impression. And I think that nicely leads to something that I think is a slightly better thing, which is the DORA metrics that we use in the DevOps space, where it is not so much about these harder metrics like user story points and burn down charts and whatever, but more on the broader value producing metrics. So for example, what is our release frequency, for example? So how often do we release? Of course, you can game that number as well, but also together with that, what is our change failure rate? So how often does it go wrong when we release? What is our mean time to repair? So if we release something and it crashes or it goes down, how much time do we need to bring our systems back into a stable state? And the change lead time, how much time does it take to have a change on our backlog moving to production? And I think those metrics can still be gamed, but are a little bit broader than only those hard numbers.
Yeah, and what they show is a piece of maturity of your team.
Exactly.
Like if you can release very often, if you can fix your bugs really fast, that means you're in control.
Yes.
It means that you are mature, that you are in control of your software, and you can add extra stuff really fast and fix stuff when it goes wrong really fast, which gives you a good insights.
Yeah.
But then this leads into McKinsey last year. They had a post about, you can actually measure developer productivity by focusing on these kind of things, like what is your change lead time, and focusing on most of the DORA metrics, like how many things can you actually get out of the door, how many features can you release as a team. And while I think, they are, again, good measurements to have as teams to see how mature you are, again, steering on those things is not the right thing. Because in the end, it does not focus on what we actually want to do as developer, and that's adding business value.
Yeah. So it's very output driven. Really on only the hard numbers, like how often and how much can you produce. But not so much on what is it really about.
So it's a good read, the McKinsey report on measuring developer productivity, but there's also some noise against it, especially from the Pragmatic Engineer newsletter, which has a really good post on, is this really what we want to measure? We should focus more on the actual outputs or the actual value that we create. And that's where we need to make a shift from just raw numbers and output and those kind of measurements into what are we delivering as a team and for the business? What business problems are we solving?
And I think that one of the things that I introduced at a number of companies where I worked is that how strange it would be. So many companies have a strategy or a mission, or at least some idea on what is the objective of the company where they were going to. But if you then ask, but how are you actually steering on that? What are your goals, and what results do you actually want to deliver to prove that you actually met those results? Most of the times that is not present. It is like only a vague objective. So one of the things that I read back then in the days was the book like Measure What Matters from John Doerr, and he describes this method called OKRs, Objective Key Results. And although of course every framework has its benefits and advantages and disadvantages, but what I do really like about it is that in the book it describes really good how you can create very measurable objectives, which are actually applicable in all the layers of the company. So you can have an objective on the highest level for the CTO, but you can also have objectives, for example, for a team for example, the Cloud Center of Excellence that needs to implement those objectives. So, for example, if you are a Cloud Center of Excellence, you can, for example, have an objective that says, I need to enhance the capabilities of adoption of cloud, and then have very measurable key results like, okay, I need to train 100 employees, I need to migrate 50% of the company's estate to the cloud, and I need to reduce my cloud-related incidents. Those are very measurable results for an objective. And the objective of the CTO can then maybe be drive technological innovation, and then have something like launch 3 technology initiatives that land on cloud, for example. So very measurable, like 3 or 50%. And you can translate that very nicely into a backlog, which also leads to metrics that are DORA or more hard related.
I like to use OKRs as well. Objectives, really describing what you want to do and then making that measurable, adding numbers to it that actually mean something for the business. So that can also be increasing revenue by X%, or um, removing or lessening the churn, or if you look at developer happiness, maybe like how many people are leaving our company because they don't like the stuff that we build here, or what's the feedback on our tools,
Yeah.
etc. Right?
And I
So
think the big denominator between all the like good metrics between brackets is that those things do not focus on one thing that you can turn the knob on or turn the button. Like number of commits, it's very easy to gain. Reducing the retaining 95% of our personnel is not one button you push. It is
No.
a lot of initiatives that you need to do within your company to actually achieve that result. But the result is very measurable because it's easy.
And we don't care how you do it,
Exactly.
as long as we get that result, because that's what we want to do, right? We want to create teams that we give them a certain goal that they should try to achieve.
Yeah.
And we don't want to tell them, oh, first you should need to do this, then you need to do this, and then you need to do this. No, if you have the power and the capability to aim for this goal and make that possible in the best way that you see it fit.
Yeah, and I think that's why we talk about engineering cultures and we do all the hard things, but it always ties back to the more process-related stuff and your operating model. And I think that this is a perfect match because, yeah, your organization needs to be catered, needs to be aligned to that stuff. So if you say teams need to be responsible for the how, and management needs to be responsible for the why. Aligned autonomy and having an operating model that supports aligned autonomy by, for example, value street teams or platform teams or whatever model you choose, where you give the teams control and responsibility to achieve their own goals. That is also something that you need to start arranging. Otherwise, it won't work.
I think it's really needed that teams have the responsibility and the capability of being responsible for a full set of, or a full business feature or business capability, because otherwise they are not in control of that key result that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
If they have to work together with 5 other teams to get this result, and some other teams are also focusing on other objectives and key results, how are we going to
bring
focus
those together?
on and how do we prioritize those kind of things?
I think what I did at a company is very nice, because we used Azure DevOps by then, but it doesn't really matter for the tool. But we said, okay, everything should be aligned to these business goals. So there were like on management level, we had objectives, and the objectives were more 2-3 years away, 4 years away sometimes. And then, okay, that is something that's the company vision. That's alignment. Everybody needs to align to that company vision. And then underneath, we created a work item type for objective, where we describe that objective and describe the number of key results under that objective. Underneath that, we broke it down into a number of goals. So what are our 1-year goals? So what are we going to do this year to actually achieve the objective in 3 or 4 years? And we broke it down in key results. And then we even broke it down a little bit further on what are we going to do this quarter, and broke it down into key results. All, aligning to those bigger objectives. And then, so that's the alignment. But then we said to the teams, okay, so these are the goals for this quarter, company-wide. Now it's up to you, teams, to make it happen. And they did the same exercise. So they created epics and features on, okay, this is what we are actually going to do within the teams, building in the product or building on the platform or whatever, to align on those objectives and also make it very measurable into key results, which was a very nice implementation of this whole aligned autonomy model.
Yeah, and that ties down into, and then you have metrics on, okay, we wanted to achieve this in our business, we wanted to increase our revenue, and we were able to do that at these amount of costs. So we spend so many engineering power on making this possible. Was it actually worth it or not? And that's where with all these other output driven metrics, that's not possible. Yeah, you can just show, oh, we do 1,000 commits, but yeah, into what? Into features that nobody is using, then yeah, it's all a waste of time of all those people, right? So
yeah, they are very focused on things like activity. So how much activity do you do? How is your performance? And maybe how efficient are you in terms of doing your work? But then also what I really like, there is this space framework from Nicole Forsgren. She works for GitHub right now, but she's a researcher. She wrote Accelerate as a book with the 4 DORA
that's where
metrics.
the DORA metrics came
Exactly,
from.
Yeah. But she also did research on developer productivity, developer experience, as it may be now called, where there are more things than only these harder metrics. So she came up with SPACE, which stands for the S for satisfaction and well-being, and then performance, activity, and then the C for collaboration and the E for efficiency. But I think most importantly within the teams, the S and the C, like satisfaction, well-being, and collaboration. So what can we actually measure on those things? There are softer metrics, but equally important.
Yeah, and they are more on the cultural side of like, how do we build our application? How do we work together and those kind of things? While the OKRs that we just talked about are more on actual business measuring on the business side. So combining those two, it's really valuable.
Yeah, because what I like with SPACE, for example, in the efficiency is really focused on the flow. So what is the flow of our developers, and the satisfaction on how happy are developers at the end of the day, regardless on did they make their hours or did they make their velocity? But I think that every professional is happier when they actually have achievable targets and then reaching those targets. So satisfaction is also about how able are you to do your job? Are you constantly blocked? Are you constantly dragged into meetings? Are you constantly informed by all kinds of managers, or are you micromanaged? That stuff is all in the satisfaction category. Yeah. And the measurement is very simple. It's just a survey or just asking people, how well are you? How satisfied are you in this company? But it is a signal already, also on the harder metrics. If the number goes down, there is something wrong.
Yeah, I think they are supporting metrics to make it possible to focus on these OKRs and those kind of things, focusing more on the long run, right? So you want to build a culture not for the goal that you have this year or the next coming 2 years. No, you want to build a company in the long run with a culture that is the same for maybe 10 years, right? So that culture needs to be something by living by and everyone in the company. And if you make those people happy, they will in the end also increase those harder metrics. But that's a really, to make that connection, that's really hard. So I would just focus on both. And I don't think making a hard relationship between those is is something that you should do.
And also a wise person from my past, Brian Harry. He was the president of the whole Azure DevOps team within Microsoft when it was still the big thing. And he was very, very fond of metrics, and he showed us during all kinds of conference talks all kinds of metrics. But he always said, never focus on the numbers, always focus on the trends. And I think that is a very wise advice, because it's great that you have like number of commits or release frequency or whatever metric you are looking at. It's a number, but what does it say, and what do you want it to say? So it's much more important to look at trends, like, okay, we want the release frequency to go down, and does it actually go down, and in which time frame? So defining your trend up front is also extremely important, I think.
We want to have to
make
release frequency to go up, right? We want to release faster, but
Yeah, well,
but it's the same
yes.
with these softer metrics in this space framework, right? The satisfaction we want it to go up, or at least stay the same if it's already high.
Exactly.
But if it's going lower and lower, then something is wrong, and it can be all kinds of things. It can be all tools that we're working with, or people from the business putting too much demand on people. It can be all kinds of different things that are really hard to put into one number. But it's, if you see that trend happening, then it's a signal that you should research, like, why is this happening?
Yeah, because by definition, it's an infinite game, right? It's never done. It's constantly, you need to constantly do your best to keep it the way you are, and you are never done. It's not like, oh, if we reach this number, we are done, because a week later the number can already be different. So it is keep going. And I think, well, maybe concluding this stuff is just looking from different perspectives to your metrics. And I think one of the good examples is, for example, when looking, for example, at cloud cost. I also like to have that conversation. The question is always, how can we reduce cost? Our costs are too high for example, cloud compute, which is maybe the case, but it is also a matter of changing perspective on, okay, cloud costs are high, but what does it actually deliver? Do you also have these numbers? And if you compare those numbers, is it then still too expensive?
Yeah, and that's where we go back to the operating model, stream-aligned teams that are responsible from end to end for certain capabilities or features. Then you can actually compare the cost of your cloud compute, your infrastructure, but also the effort you put into, compared to what is the business value and of this capability, right? So you can actually see, should we invest more into this capability or not? And are those high costs, are they worth it? If your cloud cost is doubling, but your business, the revenue is quadrupling, then it's probably fine, right?
Yeah, and that's where the cloud unit economics and all that stuff comes in. And that is also about, changing perspective and measuring the right thing, and not only one thing. And I think, concluding this episode a little bit is if you start measuring stuff, which is a good thing, I think we can all agree on that. Don't directly steer on what you find, but try to find different perspectives and try to give different approaches to teams, looking at trends and OKRs on, but what is it that you actually want to achieve, instead of lowering or hiring a number.
Yeah, I think we did quite a talk about a very complex topic that goes from left to right, anywhere. So it's a really broad topic, which we I think we were able to summarize in half an hour. Maybe we can do some more in-depth episodes on certain of these areas where we just talked about. So if you would like that, just let us know, and we will try to focus on those kind of things.
Yeah, and if not, then we will try to find a different topic for the next episode of the Lead Podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.